Good morning, Kingswood.
Good morning.
If you're visiting with us this holiday weekend, we're glad you are here with us, and we hope that you'll be able to share in our community this morning. So you read just a few moments ago a parable that probably when you heard it, you were like, oh, wow, that's thick, that's heavy, that's challenging. That's how I felt when I first read it. There were some things in there that sort of like stood out to me. And most of all, when I read that, I also had to kind of consider my own journey of being invited to follow Jesus and what that looked like. So when I was 5 years old, I was sitting on the front pew of a Pentecostal charismatic storefront church in Elgin, Illinois, and the preacher was preaching a hellfire and brimstone sermon. And I remember sitting there at 5 and going, boy, I don't want to go to hell. And so I remember at 5 years old, I turned to my grandma and I said, I want to get baptized today like the preacher said. I don't want to go to hell. I want my sins to be forgiven. The preacher had gone through the 10 Commandments in his sermon, and I was going through check. I've done a lot of these things. And you'd think when it came to thou shalt murder, I would have been like, oh, well, I'm safe on that one, right? But all I could think about was just not long after I not long before I heard that sermon, one of my friends next door named Ingrid had come over to my house, and she had this bag full of water and a goldfish inside of it. She said, look what my mom just got me. It was fresh from the pet store. And then her mom said, Ingrid, come on in. Come here, I need to talk to you. And she said, do you want to hold my goldfish in the bag while I go home, and then I'll come back for it? And I said, well, sure, I can keep it company. So while she was gone, I thought, boy, I really would love to pet this goldfish. So I thought, how can I open this bag? And it had this thing on the top that was so tight, and I couldn't open it and take it out. It was metal. And so I thought, well, maybe if I just lay it on the ground, and then I just burst it open with a good push of my heel, then it'll burst open, and I can take the goldfish out. So I put this bag on the ground, and sure enough, I do that. Water goes everywhere. I see broken plastic, but I don't see the goldfish anywhere. I'm looking around, and no sooner than I'm looking around, Ingrid comes up. What happened to my goldfish? And I said, well, I wanted to pet it. And she said, well, I don't see it. Do you see it? And I don't see it. So we're looking everywhere. Can't find it. Later that night, my grandmother was taking my shoes off, and she said, what's on the bottom of your shoe? There was Goldie. So I knew sitting in church that day at 5, I said, well, I've committed murder too. I really need Jesus to forgive me. So that Sunday, after church, went on down to the quarry, and I was baptized. Now, at about 9 years old, we stopped going to church. And I was a menace of a kid, so much so to the point that the principal, social worker, and my teacher all called my mom into a meeting and said to her when I was 12, your son has one more shot, and if he does anything again that's equal to expulsion, he's going to a disciplinary school. My mom didn't know what to do with me. I remember my mom looking at me and saying, I'm so disappointed in you. Why are you acting like this? You get a hold of yourself. Figure this out. And I didn't know how to do it or what to do. So my mom took me to church and said, fix this kid. And I tell you what, it didn't happen overnight, but as I sat and I began to listen to children's sermons every Sunday, boy, I tell you what, it did something in me. It brought back to me the remembrance of what my grandma had taught me and what I had learned at 5 years old, and I had made that decision to be baptized. It brought back the invitation that Jesus had invited me to be in relationship with Christ, to know Jesus enough that it would change and transform the way in which I viewed the world, the way in which I lived, and the way in which I carried so much guilt and shame about the things that I had done. You know, I had grown up in the church being told all my life that there were certain things that were sinful, and that if you continued to do certain things sinfully over and over again in what they would call habitual sins, God wouldn't forgive you until you completely stopped it. So if you struggled with anything over and over again, you better figure that out quick before you die, because God will get you. I remember carrying so much fear about that. And looking back at it now through good old therapy and whatnot, I have been able to see that in many ways I served overt amounts of time and energy in the church because I thought maybe I could just outweigh the good with the bad. Maybe God would overlook the sin in my life enough that He would say, well, you're pretty good, though. I'm grateful that I've reached a place in my life when I realize that I don't deserve God's love and I can't earn God's love. That God invites me to the table to be in relationship despite all those things. And the beauty of our text today is this simple image. It's this image that Jesus tries to draw of what it looks like to be invited to be in a relationship with Jesus, to know Jesus to the point that it sort of transforms and changes you. Not just an intellectual knowledge, but an experiential knowledge. And Jesus here shares a parable that I think in many ways is prophetic. It's a word that I think that later on when this was written, the early church probably found great hope and strength from. That they said, remember that parable that Jesus told and that we've had passed around? Remember what he said there? This should give us hope. But at the time, maybe it didn't make as much sense to them when Jesus tells it. And maybe it still doesn't make as much sense to us today, but hopefully we can make some sense of it. So here's what the story goes. There's a king. He's got a son. And they're getting ready to have a big wedding party. And whenever you have a wedding, who do you invite? The people who you're closest to, the people who know you best, right? So for those of you who are married, shoot up your hand for me, would you? Okay, great. And I won't make those of you who want to be married raise your hand. We won't do that. But a reality is there's some of you who've been married in the room, some of you who would like to be married, some of you who have been married before. And for those of you who that's been your experience, think about the wedding list, right? I mean, you probably had to make cuts at some point. Well, this person just, I don't know, they're kind of loud and obnoxious. Let's just take them out, But so-and-so's going to be upset if we don't invite them. And, but I'm not that close with them. It's fine. They can get the cut. But then you have also the other people that you're like, that person has to be at the wedding, right? And that person actually, they're going to stand up in the wedding next to me. Or I want mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or my godfather or whoever it may be. I want them to sit on the front row at the wedding, right? The people you invite to the wedding are the people who know you best, who've formed you and informed you along the journey. That's exactly what's happening here, is the king, the father to the son of who's having this wedding says, all right, we're going to invite everybody that knows you best, and they're going to be able to celebrate this day. So because they don't have UPS or the United States Postal Service to deliver invitations, he sends his servants out to go to each door and deliver personally the invitation to the wedding. But some weird things play out when the invitation comes. One guy gets an invitation, he goes, oh, no, man, I can't be there, I got work. Okay, Uncle Remus, whatever you say. I can't be there, I got to go to the fields. I got to work in the fields, won't be there. Okay, Aunt Cindy, that's fine that you won't be there. I'm going to kill you right now for the invitation to that wedding. Doesn't that feel like a bizarre response? Yes. But the passage says literally some of the servants came to deliver the invitation and then they were killed right there. Wow. I mean, that's awful. You think your postman thinks he has a problem with your dog. Imagine if life was threatened at the invitation to a wedding. So the Bible says that literally some of these servants were killed for bringing the invitation. And then others of the servants came and brought the invitation, and someone said, oh, you look like a really nice servant. I'm going to steal you and take you for myself. Well, some of the servants got away from doing this invitations, and so they came back and they said, these people are crazy that you invited to this party. He says, and they reported, none of these people who you invited, who know your son well, are coming to the party. None of them are coming to the wedding celebration. And so the king, perplexed by this, says, well, they're just not worthy of it, I suppose, then, if they don't want to come. He says, but we've got this whole room filled, and I've already prepared everything. We have to have some people at this wedding celebration. So he says, go on out into the streets and invite anybody you see. Good or bad, invite them. And so the servants do. And all of a sudden, the wedding celebration started, and I'm sure the father and the son look out and go, do you know these people? I don't know these people. But the room is full. The invitation's been extended. But then something really weird happens. The king, the father of the groom, sees this man standing, and he doesn't have the wedding garment and robe like everybody else does. Everyone would have had the same wedding garments and robes, kind of like how when you have people standing up in your wedding, they're kind of all uniform, right, with what they wear. Well, in this context, everybody in the room would have worn this. And this particular guy isn't wearing the wedding robes. You know what he's wearing? Flip-flops, a t-shirt, and a tank. Not literally, but that's what I picture. He's not wearing the robes. He's not wearing the wedding garments. And all of a sudden, king says, what are you doing? Why aren't you wearing what everyone else is wearing? Why are you wearing that here? And the king casts him out. And some of you may be thinking, well, that feels really problematic. It kind of is, isn't it? But think about this for a moment. Did you know that when in the ancient world, weddings often would last several days? There was lots of drinking, lots of eating, lots of dancing. But more than that, whoever was hosting the wedding always provided everybody at the wedding with a wedding garment or wedding coat. And so similar to, like I said, groomsmen and bridesmaids wearing something, everybody would be uniform in their celebration. But this one particular guy who was going to have this free robe provided to him for the wedding, does he put it on? No. He just does his own thing. He chooses to reject it. Now here's what the parable is kind of juxtaposing here. God in this story is the king. Jesus is the son. And God is inviting all of us to come and to partake and participate in celebrating knowing Jesus, and in knowing Jesus to be transformed and changed by Christ. Now, the problem about the story that's interesting is the people who should know Jesus the best, they reject Jesus. In this passage in Matthew 22, the next chapter in Matthew 23 literally is the religious leaders planning how are they going to kill and end Jesus' life. If you notice something in the context, many of these parables are meant for the religious elite of the day, for the people who should know Jesus better than anybody, right? You invited people to your wedding who know you better than anybody. Of course, and in the same way, Jesus is saying, listen, if anybody should know me and celebrate my coming as the Messiah, it should be the religious elite. They didn't have the printing press, so only people that had access to the ancient scrolls and scriptures of the Torah would have been the religious leaders. If anyone could know and study and have an understanding of who the Messiah was, it would have been the religious elite. Yet they are the very ones who said, I don't know this Jesus. This isn't the Messiah. Yet they are the very ones who rejected and denied him. They're the very ones who refused to come to the party and to celebrate the coming of Jesus and this marriage between Christ and his church. They are the only ones who didn't show. But reality is because they didn't show, the invitation was extended even further. And the gospel now, that was only in the Middle East at the time, has now spread all around the globe. And us Gentiles and even the Jews and the Romans and the Americans and the Russians and the Canadians and the British and empires that have fallen and that have risen, we've all had the opportunity to be invited to the party. Be invited to see Jesus for who he is and be transformed by Christ. Now, the end of the story is problematic because it seems that all these people are invited, but one guy's kicked out of the party because he's not uniform. He doesn't have the right attire on. Why was he kicked out? Why wasn't he welcome to stay? Here's what I think. I think a lot of us, in many ways, we can know Christ intellectually. We can go to church. We can go through the motions. We could be in the choir. Maybe even we experienced baptism or went through the confirmation process, and we've learned a lot about our faith. But some of us know a lot, but we're never transformed by it. We never actually put on the cloak of Christ. We never allow Christ to truly change us. Christ gives us so many tools and resources to be changed and transformed, to reflect and to look like him. Yet often sometimes we just keep God at a distance. I'll come to the party, but I'm not dancing, and I'm not celebrating, and I'm not going to have any change. I'm just going to come. But I think that Christ invites us to put on the cloak of righteousness. For those parables that we've been hearing the last few weeks, think about 7 times 70 being forgiven. That is putting on the cloak of righteousness. Think about humbling yourself and remembering that those who are last will be first in the kingdom. That is putting on the cloak of righteousness, of saying, no, I want to not just know Christ. I don't want to just celebrate Christ. I want to be transformed by Christ. So to bring a close to the message, I can't help but think about a recent invitation I got to a wedding. I wasn't here one Sunday because I had gone to the church in the morning during our worship service to participate and celebrate in this wedding. As I watched the crowd and everyone that was there, I thought, well, where is my friend's parents? Where are his grandparents? And I don't see his brother and sister. I was a little confused. Maybe I'm just missing them. Maybe I'm not seeing them right now. There were a lot of people there. But a few days later, I asked him, I said, hey, beautiful wedding. It was just amazing and dynamic, and I teared up several times. But one thing I can't seem to shake is, where was your family? I didn't see them. Did I miss them? Were they seated somewhere else so I couldn't see them? He said, well, my parents still don't support our marriage. And so they didn't come. And neither did the rest of my family. And I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. He said, well, that's why we ended up having the wedding on a Sunday morning in worship. Because although my family can't celebrate our marriage, our church family has become those who have celebrated our marriage. And they've become like family. And I paused for a moment, and I couldn't help but consider this story now. That there are some who are invited that just never will be able to celebrate and see Jesus for who he is. There are some who just aren't ready to accept that. But that doesn't mean the invitation isn't extended. And there are those of us who have responded to the invitation, have seen Jesus for who he is, are here, and we are celebrating, and we come to this table Sunday after Sunday and remember the gift that we have been invited to celebrate in the marriage of Christ and his church. But may it not stop there. May we be a people who then clothe ourselves in righteousness, who take advantage of the resources and tools by which Christ has given us to be filled with the Spirit, to be supported in his church, that we may be a people who look more like Christ and don't simply know who Christ is. Thanks be to God. Amen. As you go back into the world, may you know Christ, may you celebrate his coming, and may you clothe yourself with his righteousness, that as people see you, they may see Christ. Go in peace and know the Lord.
Amen.
Amen.